My wife always wanted a man who'd gamble for her affections. Turns out she meant that literally. He wins more in one night than you earn in a year, Selene said, not even looking up from her phone as she painted her nails that particular shade of red she saved for special occasions. The same red she'd worn on our wedding day, back when I thought I was the special occasion. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her transform into someone I barely recognized anymore. 3 months of late nights at the Riverside Casino had changed her. The makeup was heavier now, the dresses tighter, the lies smoother. Who exactly are we talking about? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Brick Kavanaugh. Even his name sounded like something you'd find at the bottom of a construction site. You know who. She finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Contempt. Pure, undiluted contempt. Brick understands what it means to take risks, to really live. I'm Daniel Farrow, 42 years old, and I work in IT security for Midwest Financial. I secure other people's money for a living, which apparently makes me the most boring man in Minneapolis, according to my wife of 8 years. Used to be, she found my stability attractive. Now it was just another word for failure. Right, I said, adjusting my glasses. And how exactly does his gambling addiction translate to relationship material? Selene stood up, smoothing down her dress. It's not addiction when you're good at it. Last week alone, he pulled in $15,000 at the poker tables. That's more than you make in 3 months. The math stung because it was accurate. My salary at Midwest Financial was decent, but unremarkable. $58,000 a year, plus benefits. In Selene's new world of high-stakes poker and champagne toasts, I might as well have been collecting unemployment. Gambling winnings aren't exactly reliable income, I pointed out. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Neither is your paycheck, apparently. At least Brick's got the guts to go after what he wants. I watched her grab her purse, the expensive leather one I'd bought her for Christmas. Back then, she'd called it perfect. Now it probably seemed cheap compared to whatever Brick was buying her. Where are you going? The casino, obviously. She paused at the mirror, checking her reflection one final time. Don't wait up. Real players don't punch a time clock. The front door slammed with a finality that echoed through our suddenly too quiet house. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence and wondering when exactly my marriage had turned into a bad country song. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I'd become an expert in reading the signs. The way she'd light up when her phone buzzed, the new lingerie that never seemed to be for my benefit, the sudden interest in poker terminology that she'd drop into casual conversation like breadcrumbs leading away from our life together. Brick says the key to winning is knowing when to fold, she'd mentioned over dinner last Tuesday, as if I'd asked for relationship advice from a man who made his living separating tourists from their vacation money. I'd started doing my own research. Turns out Brick Kavanaugh wasn't quite the high roller Selene believed him to be. A few discreet inquiries through my network security contacts revealed a man with a gambling problem, not a gambling gift. His wins were sporadic, his losses consistent, and his reputation around the casino circuit was starting to smell like yesterday's fish. But Selene didn't want to hear facts. She wanted to hear about the night he'd won $8,000 on a single hand, not about the 12 nights he'd lost twice that amount trying to recreate the magic. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in March. I'd gotten home early from work, hoping to surprise Selene with dinner from that Italian place she liked. Instead, I found her suitcases lined up by the front door like soldiers preparing for deployment. I was going to leave you a note, she said, not even having the decency to look embarrassed. How thoughtful. I set down the takeout bags, my appetite suddenly gone. Let me guess. You're moving in with your poker-playing boyfriend. His name is Brick, and yes, we're taking things to the next level. The next level of what? Financial ruin? She turned on me then, her eyes flashing with that same contempt I'd been seeing more and more lately. You just don't get it, do you? Some people are willing to take chances. Some people understand that you have to risk something to gain something. And what exactly are you risking? Our marriage? Our home? 8 years together? I'm risking being stuck with someone who's given up on life. She grabbed her purse and keys. Brick's picking me up in 10 minutes. His Mustang's getting detailed, so he's bringing the convertible. Of course he was. Nothing said responsible life partner like owning multiple vehicles while living off gambling winnings. Selene, think about this. Really think about it. You're throwing away everything we've built together for a guy you've known for 3 months. She paused at the door, and for a moment I thought I'd gotten through to her. Then she smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen on her face. Dan, honey, we didn't build anything. You built a safe little box, and you expected me to live in it forever. Well, I'm done with boxes. The sound of a car horn echoed from outside. Brick's chariot had arrived. "That's my ride," she said, grabbing the first suitcase. "I'll send for the rest of my things later." I watched through the window as Brick Kavanaugh helped my wife load her belongings into his silver convertible. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, tanned, with the kind of confident swagger that came from either supreme self-assurance or supreme ignorance. Given what I knew about his gambling record, I was betting on the latter. Selene slid into the passenger seat, and even from a distance, I could see her laugh at something Brick said. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. They drove away with the top down, Selene's hair streaming behind her like a victory flag. I stood at the window until the taillights disappeared, then walked back to the kitchen where our Italian dinner was getting cold. I ate alone that night, but I wasn't really hungry anyway. Instead, I found myself thinking about poker terminology. Selene had been right about one thing. Knowing when to fold was important, but she'd forgotten the other half of the equation. Sometimes the best strategy isn't folding, sometimes it's knowing when to go all in. The first week after Selene left was like living in a museum dedicated to my own failure. Every room held evidence of a marriage that had slowly suffocated while I wasn't paying attention. Her coffee mug still sat in the dishwasher. Her magazines were still scattered across the coffee table, bookmarked with articles about spicing up your love life and signs you've outgrown your relationship. Subtle as a brick through a window, my wife had been. I threw myself into work, which wasn't difficult since Midwest Financial was implementing a new security protocol that required my full attention. Numbers and algorithms made sense in a way that human relationships apparently didn't. When code didn't work, you could debug it. When marriages didn't work, your wife packed her suitcases and moved in with a professional gambler. "You look terrible," said Tim Kowalski, my supervisor and the closest thing I had to a friend at the office. Tim was one of those perpetually worried middle managers who treated every minor setback like an approaching apocalypse, but his heart was in the right place. "Thanks for the pep talk," I said, not looking up from my monitor. "Seriously, Dan, when's the last time you went home before midnight, or ate something that didn't come from a vending machine?" I considered the question. "Tuesday, I think." "It's Friday." "Then Tuesday." Tim pulled up a chair next to my desk, which meant he was settling in for one of his concerned colleague conversations. "Look, I don't know what's going on in your personal life, and it's none of my business, but you're starting to worry me." I finally looked at him. Tim was 45, divorced, and lived alone with a cat named Mr. Whiskers. If anyone understood relationship failure, it was him. "Selene left me," I said simply. "Ah." Tim nodded like this explained everything. "For another guy?" "For a poker player she met at the casino." "Ouch," Tim winced. "That's rough, buddy, but maybe it's for the best, you know? If she's the type to run off with some gambler, then she wasn't the right person for you anyway." The thing about well-meaning advice is that it's usually both completely accurate and completely useless. Yes, Selene leaving probably was for the best in the long run. That didn't make coming home to an empty house any easier. "I appreciate the concern, Tim, but I'm fine. Just keeping busy." "Uh-huh." He didn't look convinced. "Well, if you need to talk or anything, you know where to find me. And maybe go home at a reasonable hour tonight. The security protocols will still be here Monday." After Tim left, I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting. I found myself wondering what Selene was doing right now. Was she at the casino, cheering Brick on as he threw away money we didn't have? Were they in bed together, planning their glamorous future built on the shifting foundation of gambling luck? The questions were torture, but I couldn't stop asking them. That's when I made my first mistake. Or maybe it was my first smart decision. The line between the two was getting blurrier every day. I opened a new browser window and navigated to Selene's social media profiles. She'd always been active online, posting photos of her lunch, sharing inspirational quotes about following your dreams, updating her status with the mundane details of daily life. But since leaving me, her posts had taken on a different tone. 3 days ago. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, living my best life with someone who knows how to treat a woman right. New beginnings, just lucky in love. 2 days ago, a photo of her and Brick at some upscale restaurant, champagne glasses raised in a toast. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. The caption read, "When you're with a winner, every night feels like a celebration." Shakseung, high roller, living the dream. Yesterday, a selfie from what looked like a hotel suite, Selene grinning at the camera with the kind of radiant happiness that used to be reserved for our anniversary dinners. Room service breakfast, and a man who knows how to spoil me. This is what I've been missing. Blessed door new chapter. Each post felt like a small knife between the ribs, but I couldn't stop scrolling. It was like picking at a scab. Painful, but somehow compulsive. The comments were even worse. Selene's friends, most of whom I'd known for years, were cheering her on like she'd just won the lottery instead of abandoning her marriage. "You deserve this happiness," wrote Jenna Morrison, who'd been maid of honor at our wedding. "About time you found someone who appreciates you," added Marla Chen, who'd spent countless evenings at our dinner table, eating food I'd cooked and drinking wine I'd bought. The betrayal stung almost as much as Selene's departure. These women had been part of our life together, and now they were celebrating the end of it like it was cause for a party. I was about to close the browser when a new post appeared. Selene had just checked in at the Riverside Casino, tagged with Brick and 3 other people I didn't recognize. The photo showed all of them around a poker table, Selene perched on Brick's lap like some kind of good luck charm. "My man's on fire tonight," the caption read. 3 hands, 3 wins. When you're hot, you're hot." I stared at the photo for a long time, studying Brick's face. He had the kind of cocky grin that suggested he believed his own hype, the kind of man who confused temporary luck with permanent skill. That's when I decided to do a little more research. Working in IT security gives you certain advantages when it comes to finding information about people. I'm not talking about anything illegal or unethical, just the kind of public records and background checks that anyone can access if they know where to look. Brick Kavanaugh, it turned out, had quite a history. Born in Detroit 37 years ago. Dropped out of college after 2 years. A series of jobs in sales, none lasting more than 18 months. 3 different addresses in the past 5 years, which suggested either a restless spirit or an inability to make rent consistently. More interesting were the financial records. Credit score in the low 500s, 2 car repossessions in the past decade, a bankruptcy filing from 2019 that had been dismissed due to incomplete paperwork. But most telling were the casino records. It took some digging, but I found references to Brick in several gambling forums and local news articles. He wasn't the high-rolling success story Selene believed him to be. He was a chronic loser who occasionally got lucky enough to stay in the game. One forum post from 6 months ago was particularly illuminating. "Saw Brick C at the Riverside again last night. Guy was down to his last $20 by midnight, begging the pit boss for a comp drink. Whatever happened to that hot streak he was bragging about?" Another post, more recent. "Brick's been hitting up everyone he knows for loans to get back in the game. Dude's got a serious problem, but he thinks he's one big win away from Easy Street. Classic addict behavior." I printed out everything I found and organized it into a folder. I told myself it was just curiosity, a way to understand what Selene saw in this guy. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was building a case file. That weekend, I drove past the Riverside Casino 3 times, telling myself I was just running errands in the area. The 3rd time, I parked across the street and watched the entrance for an hour, feeling like a private detective in a bad movie. I didn't see Selene or Brick, but I did see the type of people who frequented the place on a Saturday afternoon. Retirees feeding quarters into slot machines. Middle-aged men in wrinkled suits, clutching scratch-off tickets like lottery prayers. Young couples burning through their date-night budget on blackjack and false hope. It wasn't the glamorous world Selene's social media posts suggested. It was sad and desperate and tinged with the kind of desperation that comes from chasing losses with bigger losses. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Selene. Instead, it was my sister, Naomi. "Haven't heard from you in a week. Everything okay?" Naomi was a nurse at Hennepin County Medical Center, which meant she had a finely tuned radar for people in crisis. She'd probably sensed something was wrong from 3 states away. I texted back, "Fine, just busy with work." Her response came immediately. "Bullshit. Call me." I drove home instead, but Naomi's text had reminded me that I wasn't completely alone in the world. I had people who cared about me, people who wouldn't celebrate if I made catastrophically bad life decisions. That night, I made myself a proper dinner for the first time since Selene left. Nothing fancy, just pasta with marinara sauce and a salad, but it felt like a small victory. I ate at the kitchen table instead of standing over the sink, and I even opened a bottle of wine. Halfway through dinner, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Selene's name, and for a moment I just stared at it, unsure whether I wanted to answer or not. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, I played the message back. "Hi, Dan, it's me." Selene's voice sounded different, less confident than usual. "I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I know this whole situation is probably difficult for you, and I don't want there to be any hard feelings between us. We were together for 8 years, and that has to count for something, right?" There was a pause, and I could hear casino noise in the background. Slot machines, conversation, the artificial excitement of people losing money in an entertaining way. Anyway, I hope you're taking care of yourself. Maybe we can grab coffee sometime and talk about everything like adults. I think that would be good for both of us." The message ended there, but she'd left me with more questions than answers. Why was she calling? What did she want to talk about? And why did she sound less like the confident woman who'd walked out of my life and more like the uncertain person I'd married 8 years ago? I didn't call her back. Instead, I poured myself another glass of wine and returned to my research. If Selene wanted to talk like adults, she'd have to accept that adults gathered information before making decisions. And I was gathering quite a lot of information about Britt Kavanaugh. The call came at 2:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, jarring me awake from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. I fumbled for my phone, expecting some kind of emergency. Instead, I found Selene's name on the caller ID. I let it ring. 5 minutes later, she called again, then again. By the fourth call, I was wide awake and irritated enough to answer. "What do you want, Selene?" "Dan?" Her voice was shaky, uncertain. "Thank goodness you picked up. I need to talk to you." "It's 2:30 in the morning." I know, but this couldn't wait. Something's happened, and I didn't know who else to call." I sat up in bed, suddenly alert. Despite everything that had happened between us, Selena sounded genuinely scared. "Are you hurt? Do you need me to call someone?" "No, nothing like that. It's just—" She paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. "Brick's in some trouble, financial trouble, and it's affecting me too." There it was, the real reason for the late-night call. I should have known. "What kind of trouble?" "He owes some money to some people, serious people, and they're not being very patient about getting it back." I almost laughed. After weeks of social media posts about winning streaks and high-roller lifestyles, reality had finally caught up with Selene's fantasy. "How much money?" $25,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $25,000 was more than I made in 6 months. It was a new car, a down payment on a house, a year's worth of groceries. "Jesus, Selene, what did he do? Bet the farm on a single hand?" "It's complicated. There were some bad beats, some unlucky streaks, the kind of thing that happens to everyone who plays seriously." "No," I said firmly. "The kind of thing that happens to people with gambling addictions. Serious players know when to walk away." "You don't understand the game, Dan. Sometimes you have to chase your losses to get back to even." I rubbed my eyes, trying to process what I was hearing. Selene was parroting gambling addict logic, like it was financial wisdom. "So what do you want from me?" Another pause. "I was hoping, we're still married, technically, and I thought maybe you could help us out, just until Brick gets back on his feet." The audacity was breathtaking. She'd left me for another man, spent weeks posting about her fabulous new life on social media, and now she wanted me to bail them out of their self-created crisis. "You want me to give you $25,000. Not give, loan. We'll pay you back as soon as Brick hits his next streak. He's due for a big win, Dan. I can feel it." "Selene, listen to yourself. You're talking about gambling debt like it's a temporary cash flow problem. This isn't bad luck. This is bad judgment." "I knew you'd react this way." Her voice shifted, becoming harder, more familiar. "You never understood taking risks. You never understood what it means to really go after what you want." "I understand the difference between taking calculated risks and throwing money away on cards and dice." "Fine. Forget I called. I should have known you'd be too scared to help." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in the dark. I tried to go back to sleep, but my mind was racing. $25,000 in gambling debt. Serious people who weren't patient about repayment. The glamorous life Selene had chosen was starting to show its true colors. I spent the rest of the night thinking about that phone call, and by morning I'd reached a decision. If Selene wanted to play games, I could play games too. The next evening, I drove to the Riverside Casino. I'd never been inside before. Gambling had always seemed like a sucker's bet to me, a way for people with more money than sense to fund casino owners' vacation homes. But if I was going to understand Selene's new world, I needed to see it firsthand. The casino was exactly what I'd expected, a windowless maze designed to keep people inside and spending money. The carpet was an aggressive pattern that probably hid stains well. The lighting was bright enough to keep people awake, but not bright enough to make them think clearly about their decisions. I bought $20 in chips and wandered around, observing the ecosystem. At the slot machines, retirees fed coins into mechanical mouths with the dedication of factory workers. At the blackjack tables, middle-aged men made increasingly desperate bets, while their wives stood behind them with expressions of resigned disappointment. The poker room was in the back, separated from the main casino floor by glass walls that made it feel like an aquarium for gamblers. I stood outside and watched the action, looking for familiar faces. I found Brick at a $5 table, playing Texas Hold'em with 7 other players. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept checking and rechecking his chips. This wasn't the confident high roller from Selene's photos. This was a man under pressure. Selene wasn't with him, which surprised me. In all her social media posts, she'd been right there beside him, his personal good luck charm. Tonight, he was alone. I watched him play for an hour. He won a few small pots, lost several larger ones, and gradually saw his chip stack dwindle. When he was down to his last few chips, he excused himself from the table and headed toward the restroom. I followed him. The men's room was empty except for the 2 of us. Brick was standing at the sink, splashing water on his face and staring at his reflection like he was trying to figure out where everything had gone wrong. "Rough night?" I asked, taking the sink next to his. He looked at me in the mirror, and I saw recognition flicker in his eyes. "You're Dan, right? Selene's husband." Ex-husband, apparently. Brick straightened up, and I could see him trying to decide whether to be defensive or conciliatory. He settled on a middle ground that came across as patronizing. "Look, man, I want you to know there's nothing personal in this. Selene and I, we just connected, you know? Sometimes these things happen." "So I've heard." I dried my hands slowly, taking my time. "How's that working out for you?" "What do you mean?" "The connection, the relationship, the $25,000 in debt." His face went pale. "She told you about that?" "She called me at 2:30 in the morning, asking for money, so yes, she told me about that." Brick looked away, suddenly very interested in the paper towel dispenser. "It's temporary, just a run of bad luck. It happens to everyone." "Does it? Because from what I've seen, it seems to happen to you pretty regularly." Now he was defensive. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've done my research, Brick. Bankruptcy filing in 2019, car repossessions, credit score in the toilet. You're not a professional gambler, you're a professional loser. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that my wife left me for a man who can't pay his debts. I know that your hot streak lasted exactly long enough to impress a woman who doesn't understand the difference between luck and skill. And I know that you're in here playing $5 poker when you owe serious money to serious people." Brick turned to face me, and for a moment I thought he might take a swing. Instead, he just looked tired. "What do you want, Dan?" "I want you to understand something. Selene thinks you're her ticket to a better life. But you're not, are you? You're just another guy who's convinced himself that the next hand will fix everything. I can turn this around. I always do." "No, you can't. And when you finally admit that to yourself, you're going to drag her down with you." I left him standing there and walked back to the poker room. Brick's seat was still empty, his few remaining chips still on the table. The other players were getting impatient. "Your friend coming back?" one of them asked me. "I don't think so," I said. "I think he just realized he was playing with money he couldn't afford to lose." I cashed in my $20 and left the casino. I'd learned what I came to learn. Brick Kavanaugh wasn't the confident winner Selene believed him to be. He was a desperate man making increasingly desperate bets. And desperate men make mistakes. Over the next few days, I noticed changes in Selene's social media presence. The posts became less frequent and less triumphant. Instead of photos from expensive restaurants, she was posting inspirational quotes about perseverance and overcoming challenges. "Every champion faces setbacks," one post read. "It's how you respond to adversity that defines your character." Another, "Diamonds are formed under pressure. Sometimes you have to go through the tough times to appreciate the good ones." The comments from her friends became more concerned and less celebratory. "Everything okay, honey?" Jenna Morrison wrote. "You seem stressed lately. Call me if you need to talk," added Marla Chen. But Selene wasn't responding to the comments, and she wasn't posting photos of herself anymore. The glamorous life was losing its shine. Then, on Friday afternoon, she called again. "Dan, it's me. I know you're probably still angry about the other night, but I really need to talk to you." This time her voice was different. Not scared like before, but resigned, defeated. "I'm listening." "Things have gotten worse. The people Brick owes money to, they're not just asking nicely anymore. They came to the apartment last night." "What kind of came to the apartment?" "They knocked on the door. Very politely. But they made it clear that patience has limits." I felt a chill run down my spine. Whatever I thought about Selene's choices, I didn't want her to get hurt. "Are you safe?" "For now. But Dan, I think I made a mistake. A big mistake. It was the first time since this whole thing started that Selene had admitted any doubt about her decision. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I just felt sad. What do you want me to do, Selene? I don't know. I needed to hear a familiar voice, and someone who knew me before all this happened. We sat in silence for a moment, and I found myself remembering better times. The early years of our marriage, when we'd been partners instead of strangers sharing a house. Selene, you need to get away from this guy. Whatever you thought you saw in him, it's not real. He's going to destroy your life. I know, she whispered, but I don't know how to get out. I've burned so many bridges, said so many things I can't take back. You can take them back. People make mistakes. People forgive. Would you? Forgive me, I mean? The question hung in the air between us. 3 weeks ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But 3 weeks ago, I hadn't seen the social media posts celebrating the end of our marriage. I hadn't watched her parade her new relationship like a victory lap. I don't know, I said honestly, but I don't want to see you get hurt. I should go. Brick's coming back, and he doesn't like it when I talk to you. Selene, wait. But she'd already hung up. I sat staring at my phone, feeling like I'd just missed an opportunity for something. Reconciliation, maybe, or closure, or maybe just the chance to be the bigger person. Instead, I found myself thinking about those men who'd visited their apartment. Polite men with limited patience, men who were owed $25,000 by a gambler who couldn't win at $5 poker. Maybe it was time for me to do a little more research. Finding Yuri Strogan wasn't difficult. Men in his line of work don't exactly hide in the shadows, they just maintain a professional distance from their clients' personal lives. A few discreet inquiries through the casino's security network led me to a small office above a pawn shop on University Avenue. The building looked exactly like what it was, a place where desperate people went to convert their possessions into temporary cash. The pawn shop's windows were filled with the usual collection of abandoned dreams: guitars, jewelry, power tools, electronics that had seemed essential until the rent came due. Yuri's office was on the second floor, accessible through a separate entrance marked only with a small brass nameplate: Financial Consulting Services. I climbed the narrow stairs and knocked on the door. Come in. Yuri Strogan was not what I'd expected. Instead of the stereotypical enforcer, I found a well-dressed man in his 50s sitting behind a mahogany desk and reading the Wall Street Journal. He looked more like an accountant than a loan shark. Mr. Farrow, he said without looking up. I was wondering when you'd come to see me. You know who I am? I make it my business to know about my clients' personal situations. Please, sit down. I took the chair across from his desk, trying to project more confidence than I felt. I understand you have a business relationship with Brick Kavanaugh. Mr. Kavanaugh owes me money, yes, $25,000, plus interest. The interest compounds daily. And my wife is involved in this? How? Yuri finally looked up from his newspaper. His eyes were pale blue and completely without warmth. Your wife chose to involve herself when she moved in with Mr. Kavanaugh. In my business, we consider couples a single financial entity. She didn't incur the debt. No, but she benefits from the relationship. That makes her a stakeholder. I leaned forward. What exactly does that mean? It means that if Mr. Kavanaugh cannot repay his obligation, I will expect Mrs. Farrow to contribute to the resolution. The casual way he said it made my stomach turn. And if she can't? Yuri smiled, but there was no humor in it. Everyone can contribute something, Mr. Farrow. Money is preferred, but there are other forms of value. I didn't ask what he meant by that. I didn't want to know. What if someone else paid the debt? That would be acceptable. I'm not particular about where the money comes from, only that it comes. $25,000 plus interest. Plus interest. Currently, the total stands at $28,400. Tomorrow, it will be higher. I did the math. At my salary, $28,000 represented more than 6 months of take-home pay. It was a significant chunk of my savings, money I'd been setting aside for retirement or emergencies. But it would solve the problem. It would get Selene away from Brick and away from men like Yuri Strogan. If I paid the debt, would that end your business relationship with both of them? Completely. I would have no further interest in their affairs. I stood up to leave, but Yuri's voice stopped me. Mr. Farrow, may I offer some advice? Sure. Your wife made a choice. She chose Mr. Kavanaugh over you, chose excitement over security, chose risk over stability. Paying her debts will not change the fact that she made that choice. Maybe not, but it might keep her safe. Perhaps. But consider this. If you solve her problems now, what prevents her from creating new problems tomorrow? What prevents Mr. Kavanaugh from gambling away another $25,000 next week? It was a fair point, and one I'd been trying not to think about. Even if I paid off Brick's current debt, there was nothing stopping him from creating new debt. Gambling addiction didn't cure itself just because someone else paid the bills. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long. As I mentioned, the interest compounds daily. I left Yuri's office with more questions than answers. $28,000 would solve Selene's immediate problem, but it wouldn't solve the underlying issue. Brick would still be a gambler. Selene would still be with him, and I would be out nearly $30,000 with nothing to show for it except the knowledge that my ex-wife was temporarily safe. That evening, I called my sister Naomi. Dan, finally. I was starting to think you'd been abducted by aliens. Sorry, things have been complicated lately. Complicated how? And don't give me any more nonsense about being busy at work. I talked to Mom last week, and she said Selene hasn't been returning her calls. I took a deep breath. Selene left me 3 weeks ago. She moved in with some guy she met at a casino. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, that woman. I never did trust her, Dan. Too focused on what other people had instead of appreciating what she had. It gets worse. The guy's a gambler with serious debts. Now Selene's caught up in it. How caught up? I told her about the late-night phone calls, about Yuri Strogan, about the $28,000 that would make the problem go away. Please tell me you're not actually considering paying this guy's gambling debts. She's still my wife, Naomi, technically. Technically, a lot of things are true that don't make them smart. Dan, you cannot bail out a woman who left you for another man. That's not noble, it's pathetic. But if I don't, she could get hurt. She could get hurt anyway. What happens next month when this Brick character loses another $25,000? Are you going to pay that too? What about the month after that? I didn't have an answer for that. Dan, listen to me. I've been a nurse for 15 years. I've seen what happens to people who enable addicts. They don't save anyone. They just become part of the problem. So I should just let whatever happens happen? You should let Selene deal with the consequences of her own choices. She's a grown woman. She made this bed. Let her lie in it. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my checkbook. $28,000. It was just money, and I had it. I could write the check tomorrow, hand it to Yuri Strogan, and know that Selene was safe. But Naomi was right. It wouldn't really solve anything. It would just postpone the problem until the next time Brick's luck ran out. I was still thinking about it when my phone rang. Selene again. Dan, thank goodness you answered. Something's happened. What kind of something? Brick's gone. He left this morning with what was left of our money. He said he had a lead on a private game, a chance to win back everything we owed. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him, but that was 12 hours ago, and I haven't heard from him since. His phone goes straight to voicemail. I felt a familiar mix of anger and sympathy. So he abandoned you. I think so. Dan, I'm scared. Those men, they're going to come looking for their money, and Brick isn't here to explain what happened. Where are you now? At the apartment, but I don't think I should stay here. If they come back, do you have somewhere else to go? I was hoping. I know I don't have the right to ask, but could I stay with you, just for a few days until I figure out what to do? The request hit me like a physical blow. After everything that had happened, after all the social media posts and public humiliation, Selene wanted to come home. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, Dan, I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But I don't have anywhere else to go. What about your friends? Jenna or Marla? They seemed pretty supportive of your new life. They don't understand the situation. They think this is just relationship drama. They don't know about the money, about the men who came to the apartment. And whose fault is that? Silence. Then quietly, mine. It's my fault. All of it. It was the first time Selene had taken full responsibility for what had happened. No excuses about following her dreams or taking risks or finding herself. Just a simple admission of guilt. Selene, I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't have you stay here. Not after everything. I understand. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know who else to call. Call your mother. Call your sister. Call someone from your family. I can't. They don't know about any of this. They think I'm living some fairy tale life with my exciting new boyfriend. Then maybe it's time to tell them the truth. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about choices and consequences. Selene had made her choice 3 weeks ago when she packed her suitcases and drove away with Brick Kavanaugh. Now she was living with the consequences. But I was making choices too. I could pay her debt and enable her poor judgment. I could let her move back in and pretend the last 3 weeks hadn't happened. Or I could do what Naomi had suggested, let Selene deal with the consequences of her own decisions. It was the hardest choice I'd ever made, but it was also the clearest. The next morning, I called Yuri Strogan. "Mr. Farrow, have you made a decision about the debt?" "I have. I'm not paying it." "I see. May I ask why?" "Because it's not my debt, and because paying it wouldn't solve the real problem." "Very well. I appreciate your honesty." "Mr. Strogan, I want to be clear about something. My wife made some bad choices, but she's not a criminal. Whatever you do to collect your money, I hope you'll remember that." "Mr. Farrow, I am a businessman, not a barbarian. I will collect what I'm owed, but I will do so professionally." "What does that mean?" "It means your wife will have an opportunity to work off the debt. There are always positions available for people in her situation." I didn't ask what kind of positions. I was pretty sure I didn't want to know. That afternoon, Selene called one more time. "Dan, I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For not bailing me out. I know you could have paid the debt, and I know you chose not to. At first, I was angry about it, but now I think I understand." "Do you?" "You're forcing me to take responsibility for my own life. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I have to solve my own problems. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I have to." "Selene, for what it's worth, I hope you do figure it out. I hope you find a way to be happy that doesn't involve running away from your problems." "Me too. And Dan, I'm sorry for all of it. You deserved better." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me with the strange sensation that I'd just heard the real Selene for the first time in months. Not the woman who'd been chasing excitement and adventure, but the person I'd married 8 years ago. It was too late to save our marriage, but maybe it wasn't too late for her to save herself. I never found out what arrangements Selene made with Yuri Strogan. I never asked, and she never volunteered the information. But 3 months later, I saw her at a coffee shop downtown, working as a barista and looking more like herself than she had in years. She saw me too, and we nodded at each other across the room. No words, just acknowledgement. She looked tired, but not defeated, like someone who was working hard to rebuild her life from the ground up. I ordered my coffee from a different barista and left without speaking to her. Some conversations are better left unfinished, but as I walked back to my car, I found myself thinking about poker terminology again. Selene had been right about one thing. Sometimes you have to know when to fold. But she'd been wrong about the most important part. The goal isn't to stay in every hand, hoping your luck will change. The goal is to recognize which hands are worth playing, and which ones will only cost you everything you have. I'd finally learned the difference.